welcome to another Light for the Journey, and we're glad that you tuned in with us. And tonight we're going to do some fun stuff. A little, at least I think so. We have some guests with us tonight, and actually just a little bit different. It's hard for me. I've got this earbud, and I'm hearing myself really, really loud, just because I have one ear. This should be an interesting show. I have one ear to use, and Jeremy's got it tied up. Jeremy, you have my ear tied up. Down there, for those of you who've tuned in, I'm Pastor Carl, and in the lower corner is Jeremy Curtis. Welcome, Jeremy. He is with Deborah Heights Church, and he's a solo pastor there, doing a good work there. He's going to join us tonight. And then Tim, welcome. This is, you've been with us a couple different times. Yep. Everybody likes it. You're filling in for Terry.
Yep.
And of course, between us, the rose amongst all the thorns, right?
Yep.
I
guess so.
Okay, that's what
you
everybody
keep
keeps
calling
saying,
me.
right? And is Jocelyn. And tonight, we take a look at life through the lens of Scripture. And I've asked Jeremy to come in. Jeremy is one of those kind of scholarly pastors. He's always got this deep stuff. So it should be fun tonight.
Right.
For tonight, the question that we're going to be addressing is the question of Easter. We're probably going to do this for a few weeks now, for the next couple weeks as Easter is approaching. And I thought, the question is, why is Easter significant to you, okay, or to us? And then, how do you go about celebrating it? So, if we put it in layman's terms, the question is, why is it important to you? What's so significant to you about Easter? So that's what we're going to do tonight. I don't know who wants to start. I thought about just reading some scriptures and starting with maybe where the disciples were for their Easter. They did celebrate, but it was kind of a little bit different than it was for us. Adam, you have an ability to put up the scriptures, right? So why don't I do that? Why don't we start out by talking about the disciples and how they did? Before you go there, Adam, I would tell the folks that what I'm reading just a little bit different than the version that we'll throw up. I'm going to be reading out of the NIV. But Jesus has died. The disciples all saw that come into play. Nicodemus and another fella took Jesus because the Passover was coming. That was a Friday. It was on a Friday, and the Passover sunset was fast approaching. So they took him and put him in a borrowed tomb. Didn't belong to Jesus. Wasn't made for Jesus. I never noticed this until I was reading over today, but Mary Magdalene actually it says she stooped low to peek into you're going to see that in a little bit, to peek into the tomb. And it's kind of interesting out of John how some of this plays out. So Jesus is placed into the tomb. He's there all the way through Saturday. We're going to pick up out of John, the 20th chapter. It's early, the first day of the week. And while I'm just going to start with verse 1. Go ahead and throw that up, Adam, if you will. And on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. And so she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciples and the ones that Jesus loved. And they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they put him. And Peter, it says that Peter ran to the tomb, and both the disciples got there. Peter outran John, and he reached the tomb first. He bent over and he looked at the strips of linen there, but did not go in. And then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. And he saw the strips of linen lying there, and as well as the burial cloths that had been all around Jesus that was folded up. Now, these guys, I'm going to stop there. These guys go back. Okay, they leave. All right, but Mary Magdalene stays. And if I was to read on, what you would see is that Mary Magdalene is there. They have now left. She decides, they've been in the tomb. She decides that she's going to stoop down and peek in again. And what she sees, if you finish reading this out, what she sees is she sees a couple angels there where Jesus was laid. And in my mind, I had this vision. I don't know about you, Jeremy, but in my mind, I had this vision of Mary Magdalene kind of stooping over, and Jesus is behind her. Okay, she kind of turns around. She's thinking he's a gardener. I don't know if she's looked up at him, or if she's just kind of still peeking in, looking down and asking the question. But she doesn't realize that it's Jesus. And when she realizes it, she calls him teacher and master. And she obviously is going to want to put her arms around him, hug him. What a magnificent scene there. And he tells her, don't hold on to me. I haven't been to the Father yet, at least according to John. And then what we find is later on in John, when you get later in the chapter, that she goes to them back at the house, and she goes to them and tells them, and Jesus shows up there later. And in verse 20 of chapter 20, if you just go there, I want to read it to you, and then we'll start talking about this. I didn't want to spend all the time in Scripture, but I love telling this story. And so Jesus is there. Actually, in verse 19, he came, stood among them, and said, "Peace be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And the reason I wanted to stop there is because tonight's question is, what is so significant to you, about Easter, and how do you celebrate it? And I thought, what better way to end right there, because that talks about celebrating. So that's the question, folks. Anybody want to go first?
I can go first.
Okay,
Sure.
go for it.
Yeah, okay. So what I love about Easter is something similar to what Nellie said in the videos that you took of our church members a couple weeks ago and put together. And it's such a prominent reminder that God loved us, and through nothing that we've done or earned ourselves, but just his pure love for us and his sacrifice for us, that we have a hope. So despite whatever problems or circumstances, tough circumstances we might find ourselves in, there's always hope, and it's Jesus is our hope. And Easter tells us that he loves us and he's with us. And in that regards, our Easter should be much more joyous than that first Easter for the disciples, because they didn't see Jesus. They didn't know yet that he was risen. They got to spend a few years of their lives with him, and for that we're kind of maybe a little bit jealous that the fact that they got to see him in the flesh. But we have the benefit of the Bible and all of the teachings of the church from the Bible, which tell us so much about Jesus that even though we haven't seen him, we can appreciate what he's done for us.
Okay. So it's kind of an everyday thing for you too, then?
Yeah, I mean, Easter especially is that reminder that God died for us. But I mean, I do, I find myself doing, it might be silly things to remind myself of God daily. Like, I have to use passwords all the time at work to access my work emails and accounts. I mean, all my passwords are
you remember, you're online now.
No, I'm not going to say what they are. But, I mean, all my passwords I use them as a reminder. So if I have to type in that password, and it might be, Jesus our hope, or giver of grace, or whatever, his grace for us, whatever the password is, and those are all old passwords. They've worked for any of my accounts. But I mean, I use passwords because I have to use them repetitively. And rather than have a cheesy password like my dog's name or my dog and cat's name or something like that, which is what my wife always does, I use a password, and it forces me for that brief instant to again be called back and reflect on, hey, I have this great job because God has blessed me with this job, and I'm going to try and do it the best I can.
And now you're fired. Hey, Adam, you want to put that on camera one, please? Put it on here so the whole world to see this guy. Number one.
Oh, man.
Just put it on number one. This is Tim Toffel. Do you want me to tell them where you work?
Well, I don't think it really matters, but I mean, but the point is, I think we're all called to be reminded of God's love for us. And Easter, it's so easy to do because it's right there in our face. That's what the sermons are about. That's what the stories are about. And they really cause us to reflect on the fact that we don't earn it. We don't deserve it. God died for us because of his love
Okay.
for us.
And so all right, we'll come back to you then and how you celebrate it. Pastor Jeremy, Easter's coming up for
Yes,
you.
sir.
What are you guys doing in your church to celebrate it? Anything? Something special?
We're taking this Easter off. I'm joking, Carl. Oh boy. So this coming Saturday, we're having an Easter egg hunt for the entire community. And so our church has filled somewhere in excess of 10,000 Easter eggs. Also, that we can tell the kids of the neighborhood that Jesus loves them, because the truth is some of them haven't heard that before. And
Cool.
I was reading this morning the whole meaning of the Easter egg, and I was struck by the fact that it originated with it was originally a pagan thing, but the Christians stole it, and what they would do is they would dye them red, and then when they cracked them open and they were empty, they would realize that the tomb is empty, just like that. So it was a visual material reminder of the empty tomb. That's the first thing that we're doing. Next week we will have a special come and go communion service on Thursday night to celebrate the Last Supper. We'll have a Good Friday service, as the name would suggest, on Good Friday, and then of course on Easter. Everybody has to have a breakfast on Easter. I think it should be in the bylaws for every church, and then we'll have services after that. So yeah, that's what we're up to.
Cool. Do you do after the service? Is there special things that you do with your family?
Well, we will have family probably this coming week because we have several people coming in for the Easter egg hunt. We might have some family in Easter week itself. I'm not exactly sure what that is. That's my wife's purview. She tells me when and where to go, and I just show up. So
That's how you celebrate Easter. Whatever honey says, then.
that's
Cool.
the safest answer, isn't it?
Okay. Well, Jocelyn, how
Okay.
about you? What do you do?
I don't know. The biggest thing that's always struck me about Easter is all of the celebratory worship that goes on. I've always been part of a church that does an extra element of worship, whether it's an extra song or if you're doing communion, or which is something we didn't do every single week. Or, if you have an extra service that's just for worship or something like that. And that's always just been really impactful to me on Easter. Like, it wouldn't be Easter without it. Because I feel like, first of all, that's one of the ways that I connect most to God is through worship and singing. But also, I feel like when you do it every single week, you can get lost, or you can get tired or whatever, and it might not
It becomes rote.
always connect. Yeah, you might not always connect every Sunday, but it's just like Tim said, actually, it's just right there in front of you at Easter. Like, you can't help but be reminded of the saving grace of Jesus at that time of year. You can't help but be reminded that new life has come and that there is hope in the world, and reminded of how you came to Jesus, really. It's a celebration of what Jesus did for us. And because of that, we can celebrate where he's brought us through that. And so that's the biggest thing about Easter to me, I guess, is just getting to reconnect in that way and having Jesus literally throw in my face every year, like, this is something that I did for you. Like,
So the worship
me.
experience, if I'm hearing you right, to celebrate Easter, the worship experience is like your greatest part of celebrating it. Then
It is in my connection, yes, to
Okay.
God, and just celebrating him. It's really important. I feel like it's easy to get caught up in family. I know family is important. It's easy to get caught up in events or all these things, but when it comes down to it, like, you have to celebrate the one who gave you all of that, who gave you that life you have. And so, yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest element to me.
okay, cool.
So
Well, Pastor Jeremy, I didn't ask you what it means to you, so I'm expecting this really profound. No pressure, no pressure. But what about you? What's the significance for you personally? You weren't raised in a church, if I remember right. You know, you're kind of like me. You weren't raised necessarily in a church. Do I recall that correctly?
Well, I actually was raised in the church. It was the Methodist church, so a little bit different than Wesleyan, but still a lot of the same kind of traditions, and so the value is definitely there. I would say that over the years, as I have grown older, and I'd like to say wiser. I'm not sure if that's true yet, but we'll see. But I would like to say that that Easter is kind of I don't know how to explain it other than it's kind of got a dichotomy to it, that there is the gravity of what Jesus has done for me on the cross, the fact that I could not deliver myself no matter what I did from my sin. And so he took it upon himself to pay that price, and he did it willingly, he did it knowingly, he did it lovingly. So there's that huge piece of it on the one side, but on the other side, there's this amazing awe that even though death is usually the end, at least that's how I usually think about it, for him it was just the beginning. And so we have him dying on a cross to pay the price for my sin so that I can be forgiven, but then we also have him coming back to life, and all of a sudden I realize that no matter what is going wrong in my life, whether it's difficulties at the church, whether it's problems at home, whether it's financial issues, whether it's, you could put in anything you want, sin, whatever you want, there is still this hope. Because, well, let's face it, it doesn't get any worse than death. Mm-hmm. And yet Jesus came back from that. He won over death. And so this idea that as bad as my situation may be, Jesus provides hope and victory even then. Mm-hmm. I love those two opposite extremes, the dichotomy of Good Friday and Easter, and I try every year to take a little time and just bask in those two polar opposites almost.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I remember for me, and then I remember for me before I was a believer in Christ, that I was sitting in a factory at a punch press, and women had been witnessing to me, and I remember thinking, why did this person? I mean, what's the deal here? Why did this person have to die for me? Okay, and shortly after that, I would say within about 3 or 4 months, I'd become a Christian. So I was obviously underneath conviction a lot, and so when I came in and started coming to church in what we call the Easter season, which is so focused on that for me, it is pretty much kind of the same thing, that he died for me. He did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I was so hopelessly lost. And oh boy, my wife still thinks I'm a hopeless case. Jeremy, you're not the only one, that has to listen to your wife. But the fact that he did. And so as we come into Easter, I just love it that that we have the Good Friday services, and it reminds me of the price paid, and the hope that then comes when we celebrate the resurrected Lord. And I think like John and Peter and the rest of the disciples, when Jesus came in amongst them, that was really cause to celebrate. They were overjoyed, overwhelmed, mm-hmm. And he gives us that promise. That is just so cool. He gives us that, that promise. So that's for me. Adam, do we have any comments? Any folks that's gotten on? Any questions for us? Nothing's happening on the chat side.
Pretty quiet.
They're quiet. They're not even picking on each. Normally they're picking on each other. Pretty quiet. Mm-hmm. Well, how are we doing for time? I know it's pretty close, isn't it?
10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes. Okay. and there's no comments. I would have thought there'd been lots of comments by now. Well,
Well, I can add kind of to what Jeremy was saying about the dichotomy of Good Friday and the Resurrection Day, and like just the extreme differences there. And I've been studying a lot on Palm Sunday because that's what's coming up next. And I feel like that for me is the start. It's a part of the story that's so essential because it kind of adds to that level of extremes. Like you have Easter Sunday, which is this huge time when Jesus is coming into Jerusalem and everyone's worshiping and praising him, and it's so beautiful.
oh, you mean Palm Sunday?
Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday, yeah, I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. Palm Sunday. And they're coming in and they're praising him and worshiping him, and they're so happy and overjoyed. But then you have Good Friday where you hit the extreme low, and then Easter. But what I think about when I think about the extremes is that I always thought Palm Sunday was like it, like that's the happiest it can be. And then like he resurrected a week later, you know, and everyone was beyond overjoyed. Like it was just more. It was so much more than even they could have fathomed a week earlier when they welcomed this man into the city. And so that just another thing to add is like how different are those things, and how cool is that, you know?
You know what struck me though, Jocelyn, as I'm listening to you talk, it occurred to me that the difference for the the apostles, and for us is that more and more know, but it started for them just a few, and they had to get out and then make it known and share, and that was part of the joy. That's why they called it the good news, you know. And so they're talking to everybody about good news and wanted to tell everybody. You and I are going to go out tomorrow, knock on some doors, and invite folks to
Yes.
Easter. You know, we want people to know that. But that's the whole point of this, even here tonight, is that we want the world to know, you know, that He lives. You know, He lives, and so it's not just, we don't just keep it to ourselves. That struck me. Not to derail you, but that, you know,
not at all.
that struck me.
Not at all. So
Well, I think Jocelyn's got it exactly right. The continuum from Palm Sunday to Good Friday is striking in every one of the Gospels. They come into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and the disciples are expecting to crown Jesus as king, and the crowds are expecting to crown Jesus as king. But then he gets there and he just looks around and goes home. It's weird. And if you follow the gospel accounts of the final of the Holy Week, you can see how we start on this high, but then this weird, just dissonant chord almost. I can hear the soundtrack in the movie, and it's all of a sudden the orchestra hits this really weird chord, and you're like, what in the world is that? And then all week long, they just go downhill, downhill, downhill until Friday. Oh, hey, we're going to crucify it.
right.
The same crowd that was shouting, crown him, is now yelling, crucify him, crucify him. It does. You're absolutely right. It adds so much when you take it as a whole unit, the Palm Sunday all the way through Easter Sunday, and see how that whole week progressed and the emotions that were involved in that. It's an intense deal,
Right.
and it should be an intense deal for us. I fear that too often I don't want to say overlook it, but that's really what it is. We take it for granted and we just kind of roll with it. No, it's Easter, yay, woohoo! So we get out our palms on Palm Sunday, and we do our communion maybe on Thursday or something, and then on Easter we get our Easter eggs, and then we just keep going on with life. And it can't be that way. This is a watershed moment for the disciples. It should be a watershed moment for us.
Yeah.
The job of the pastor, Jeremy. How do we duplicate this, replicate this every week, every Sunday? You know, there are some churches out there that they say that every Sunday is Easter Sunday. It should be, but there is a celebration that comes that's special as we celebrate this. Have you found a way? Have you found a way, Jeremy, to fire the church up every Sunday? You know, don't we wish every Sunday was Easter? A lot of work.
Yeah, I preach a 45-minute sermon, and that really does it every time.
Every time.
Well, you're not alone. You're not alone in that. I went to 10 till 12 today. we start at 10:30, Jeremy? Does that
Yeah.
tell you anything?
That's about the same for us. So, and there were people cheering and saying encore, encore, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Please, Pastor, keep going. Some more. Give me more.
Yeah.
Give me more.
Yeah. Right. No, I don't have an answer to that question. The truth is, that's I don't know if that's even an appropriate thing to be doing, because I don't think that that's sustainable in the long run. Every week you'd
No,
have to be
sure.
doing better and bigger stuff. But to some extent, you're exactly right. In fact, if you look at the history of the church, the reason that we worship on Sunday is because Jesus was raised that day. The disciples, they would go to synagogue on Saturday, but then they get together and worship Jesus on Sunday because that's the day he came back. And so it changed everything about their entire week, the way that they lived their life, the whole rhythm of life switched for them because of Easter.
Okay. How much time do we have, Adam?
3 minutes, and we also have
2
a
minutes.
question.
Okay.
Okay.
What's
Dustin said something. What's it say? Can you read it?
In the time frame from Palm Sunday to Good Friday, what happened to the people of Jerusalem to go from such a welcoming spirit to a spirit of hate towards Jesus? They went from welcoming to crucifying him in a span of less than a week. Does the Bible shed any light on this?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Good answer.
Dustin?
Absolutely, I think it does. If you read through and you kind of read between the lines of the different gospels, I think that you can see it, though. For instance, Palm Sunday, they're expecting to coronate Jesus. They're expecting he comes to the temple and he becomes king. He kicks out Rome, and all of a sudden, oh, look, now it's King Jesus, and Jerusalem is the capital of the world. But instead, depending on which gospel you look at, he either walks into the temple, kind of looks around, and then goes back out to Bethany and Bethphage, or he comes in and he starts kicking out the money changers and the merchants.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't exactly expected. So they're expecting him to be king, but instead he does this. The next day, he shows up back in the temple, and he's teaching things, and he doesn't take the crown yet. And if you read, most of the gospels will say that the cleansing of the temple happened on Monday. So on Monday he shows up, he kicks out all these people that they thought was just normal, and then he just sits down and starts teaching instead of becoming king. And so I think you get this puzzled, what is going on with Jesus? And then on Tuesday you see the Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes showing up, and they start attacking him and questioning his authority and really challenging him, and it goes back and forth. And again, he doesn't take up the crown, because that night he walks back out to Bethany again. And so I think you get this, what's going on? Were we messed up and wrong? And it's just kind of a downhill slide from the moment that he showed up to the adoring crowds and did not take over and deliver them from Rome.
Right.
You know, I would add to that, and we can't lose sight of that. And this is a political hot arena.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at our nation in politics right now, and we're what? We're all over the place, and loyalty is fickle.
Right.
You know,
Mm.
and Jesus, he's not taking the crown, and so okay, so he's not doing what we anticipate. And you're absolutely right, Jeremy. And it's politics, and you know how I was asked to go to, I'll never forget this, I was asked to go to a town hall when I was pastoring in Kentucky and pray over the proceedings for the town hall meeting, and the mayor and all them were there. And I reminded them, I said, if your constituents are happy with you right now, enjoy it, because it won't be long-lived. Mm-hmm. And then I challenged them, before I prayed for them, I challenged them to, their job is to govern and to do it with diligence and to do it righteously, and God is expecting them to govern well. And then I prayed for them, and I had several of them come back and said, you're absolutely right, because I told them, I said, if folks like you right now, enjoy it, because there'll be a time when they don't, and that's just the nature of people. So I don't know, Dustin, if that helps, but it was a political hotbed as well. So yeah, it's all over the place. You mix. Yeah, I'm out of time. I hear that. Jeremy, if you'll hang on, we do a post show and we pray for folks and that kind of stuff. But I do need to close up this so that we can put a recording on YouTube and that kind of thing. So those of you who are tuned in, we'll answer some more questions. Thanks, Adam. We went way over. Let me, Tim. You've never done a closing pitch for the church. Anything you want to say about our church? About make a pitch?
No pressure.
Yeah.
Sure.
What do you like about our church? Why should folks come here?
Okay, well, I think the number one reason is the people are very, very friendly. And you won't get accosted when you walk through the door, but you won't be ignored when you walk through the door. So it doesn't matter what your status is in life, you come here and you should feel welcome.
Do you know where the address is? You know how to get here. You know,
It's on.
it's
up-
410 28th Street.
Okay, and it's up the hill from South Menards on Broadway.
Okay.
Yes.
There you go. Thank you, Adam. Adam put it up there. We have well, they're on our website, but for those who are in YouTube, go ahead and put our web address up there as well. You can find us and more information about us there. And we have services on at 10:30 every Sunday. We do this every Sunday night at 7. And we have life groups on Sunday morning at 9:30, on Wednesday at 6:30, and on Friday at 9 a.m. And then children's kids zone is Jocelyn.
6:30 on Wednesdays.
Okay, there we go. There we have it. Well, thanks for joining us, and look forward to next week. I'm sure we'll get into Palm Sunday next week. It's coming quick, too. Jeremy, I appreciate you being with us. Adam, you can stop the recording.